Hello, hello, Will.
Hey, how are you?
I am so thrilled and excited we finally got to do this interview.
I know, me too.
I am so in love with Lyle, Crocodile. You smile, you grin, your heart explodes, and your toes tap, and you bounce in your seat through the whole movie.
I love it.
This is such a joy. I was a huge fan of the books. I had 4 nephews. I bought them all, each of them their own set of the books. So to see Lyle really come to life with this film, it just thrills me to no end.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, that's the best feedback. That's why we made it. For people like you who actually can really appreciate it and see it and understand the joy of it. So that means a lot to us. Thank you.
I still remember when the first Lyle book came out, and I was in elementary school. I was only, 7 years old. And
Wow.
I can close my eyes and tell you right now where that book was in my elementary school library on the shelf, because I would gravitate towards that. I always had certain books I would always gravitate to, and I knew where they were on the shelves. And Lyle was one of them. But this adaptation, oh my God, I don't even know how you and Josh, and of course working with Will Davies, you really incorporate all of the ebullience and fantasy and fun of the books. You translate it so well, but then you also bring touchstones of the books themselves to life here when you have Mrs. Primm drawing pictures of Lyle and framing them and hanging them on the staircase wall like family portraits. And those are the illustrations from the book.
Yeah, exactly. I think we really wanted to honor the book as much as possible because we're such crazed fans for it. And there's all these little sort of Easter eggs throughout, like the tile in the, in the bathroom is the tile from the book. It's the black and white tile with intermittent green pieces, and we got to build that from scratch. And then, like small things like the moving company is the same moving company in the book. That's in the actual movie that you see very briefly as the Primms are settling into the house. And then, as you said, like those illustrations are so beautiful and sort of evocative and kind of mysterious and whimsical and have their own little sort of shaky style. And we really wanted to find a way to incorporate them. So on the staircase, when Constance's character walks upstairs during a montage, you see not only new illustrations that she and our art department painted with permission, obviously, from the family's estate, but we managed to pull out a lot from the book and use that. And then little things like Lyle holding pigeons in the park is straight from the book. Lyle, obviously, in the bath is straight from the book. And as much as possible. Him, with the flowers in the kitchen is straight from the book. So we tried to give as much, for the fans of the book, even though it's, probably a specific kind of group of people. But and we're glad you're one of them. Yeah.
There is never a doubt, as I watched Lyle, there was never a doubt in my mind that you and Josh and Will loved the book as much as I did.
Yeah.
Because all the touchstones, the Easter eggs, they are all there. But they're presented in a loving way. It's not just gratuitous and thrown in. It's like, oh, we better put this in. No, it's so beautifully done. But in order to do that and to honor the book and the story and the whole idea of Lyle being this huge crocodile, this presents a production problem for you because being a musical and you have all these production numbers, you have your production design, the Primm house, narrow staircases, very teeny tiny bathroom, kitchen isn't that big, and you have to allow for the logistics of the actual size of Lyle when you're staging
exactly.
all of these numbers and blocking scenes. So I'm really curious how you and Josh handled that, along with your cinematographer, obviously, with Javier, and with the
Yeah.
production numbers, your choreographer. That I'm totally fascinated by.
Oh, cool. Well, yeah, I mean, a few things to answer. I'll try to keep it in order of the questions. But the first is that, in the book, it's a brownstone, and at that time, you could live on the Upper East Side, in a brownstone as a family, of middle income. And I think that was something we struggled with. At one point, we were like, should we make it 188th Street? But even that, you'd have to be 288th Street, maybe, to be accurate. But so we tried to keep the scale actually scaled down, even though it's an exorbitant, leap of faith that they would live in a brownstone like this, which is also why we tried to explain that the school bought it in some auction and they used it for faculty. But Mrs. Primm was very successful in her time before she decided to, step aside to focus on Josh. So I think we had our entry points, but all of it to say we tried to, within that, be modest about scale and not make it feel too much like a set. So we really did do the dimensions of those sort of uncomfortable Upper West Side brownstones, and you're right to call it out. The staircase, the step is very narrow, the hallways are very narrow, and the kitchen is pretty modest, even though it's in this brownstone. And when you do that, two things happen. One is you're dealing, which is funny because it's a set, but we were dealing with the confines as if we were on location, which, people often while we were on set were wondering, why did you build this and then not allow every wall to be, flown away and disappear? And it's because we wanted it to feel as real and as practical and as grounded as possible. So, we were in that kitchen, I remember the day we were standing there with our choreographer and we were looking around and we were like, okay, well, this is the set. Like, this is, these are the four walls that we have to sort of invent our way through. And the only thing we really did was take the backs off of some cabinets, but otherwise, we were within those four walls and just had to be inventive about the way that we choreographed and things that we could bring to it. And, breaking it up into montage and knowing that we could use the crosses and the refrigerators and their kind of dance with each other that was sort of a little bit of a come and go, back and forth around the table. But for Lyle himself, we had a lot of talks early on about how big and what the scale and size was. And we wanted him, because we knew we were dealing with a 12-year-old, we wanted him to not be so outsized that it was suddenly like a giant, that he was 8 feet. So we put him at 6'1", and we hired a great, representative for him that was a good guide for us on set, an actor named Ben Palacios, who basically was Lyle's height. He dragged a tail around with him, and that was our guide for how we could block shots, lens shots, and have a representation there of Lyle on set live for the actors, and also for our camera. So, all of it to say, we scaled down the set as much as we could so that it felt real, and then we brought our own version of a crocodile stand-in to help us, bring it all there. So that's how we did it.
It's amazing to see it. And having your own version of a crocodile there on set, as helpful as that can be to your actors, especially with a child actor like Winslow, I think it's more helpful to Javier and his camera crew as to where they can actually move the cameras, because you do have these beautiful production numbers and you're utilizing your entire space within the kitchen, within the bathroom. Your camera is not stationary. We're getting a 360 happening. And, and that's what I'm watching this and I'm like, how in the world do they fit lighting, camera gear, rigs? You got to go 360s. This just, I found stupendous that you pulled it off.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And of course, not making Lyle 8 feet tall, you make up for that when, Josh first sees Lyle up in the attic, because you Dutch the camera up. So, of course, with any kid, it looks much larger than life. And you play with that throughout the film. And you go from Dutching, and then the Dutching gets smaller and smaller until it's eye level, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that so much thought, that detail, Will, makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, well, it's an astute way of looking at things, and you're absolutely right to call it out. So thank you. I mean, we tried to, work with Javier RDT and make subtle choices that sort of brought the whole thing online. Just one thing I want to circle back to that you mentioned, but it's our biggest nod to the book, is that we had made a choice early on because the book had made the choice that Lyle didn't speak.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about being a kid and looking at that book that I remember, and I'm sure you do too, knowing that you could find it easily in your library. But, you really did empathize with him just from very little in that drawing. You know what I mean? Like his eyes, his expression, his eyebrows. And I think we wanted that challenge. And we're worried that the strongest flavor that would sort of upend the apple cart was going to be assigning what normally happens, which is sort of a comedian with a big personality and a sellable recognizability that would play Lyle, that would suddenly have to really be the persona of Lyle. It's very tricky to do that correctly. Like in Paddington, they use Ben Winshaw.
Right.
What's great about him, and he does such a nice job, is, you don't have a lot of voice association. So you don't hear that voice and go, oh, I know exactly who that actor is, and I know exactly what that actor is going to feel and sound like. They were able to really thread the needle well, but I think our challenge was, let's honor the book and try to see if we can get audiences to follow the emotional life of this, and empathize with this giant crocodile as a presence within this family, and not have to rely on, clever voice or clever joking, and just let yourself impose your own emotional life on him. And so that's definitely a nod to the book.
Well, and I was so happy that when I started watching Lyle was not talking. I was beyond thrilled, Will, that you did not sacrifice that. And your visual effects, your CGI, for actually inserting Lyle. And I'm sure a lot of this comes from Ben's work, is we get like a slump. He hangs his head when he's sad. You feel, you do empathize and you sympathize with him, especially when Hector comes back and then Hector disappears and Hector takes him and then he's not making him money, so Hector leaves. You feel that sadness. And, in my initial notes that I sent over to your publicist, to Brooke, I said, you get sad because Hector abandons him, but your heart smiles because Lyle is so adorable. But, you're shedding crocodile tears in this film and having crocodile-sized heartbeats all at the same time. And I think it's masterful the way you guys pulled that off.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. It was a process, and it took its own sweet time. We had this kind of interim step because Ben was so great. We showed the movie to an audience as a test audience with Ben in there, and it really worked. And I think what a lot of our anxiety was going forward is, so what happens when we start to make Ben disappear and Lyle appear? And I think it really took a long process, and we had great visual effects partners to, bring the full range of emotion, because obviously easier said than done. And, when you translate humanity onto a CG platform, it can be very challenging, because we didn't do motion capture or anything like that. We didn't have a trigger, like they did with Lord of the Rings with Smeagol or anything. It was basically just our brain and a stand-in for Ben, you know what I mean? And like kind of the translation was left on all of our shoulders. So we feel really happy about it. And honestly, we didn't get to see it finished fully with an audience until the premiere, which was like a little bit of an anxiety fest.
Wow. I'm curious, because you do have production numbers in here, did you have the songs early on to incorporate within the structure of the film, or did they come after the fact? Because these production numbers are so standout and so important.
Yeah. It was a process. I mean, we had one song prior to shooting. The songs kind of rolled in as we were going. And I think, we knew where there would be placements, and I think the guys were super smart about that and good partners. But it definitely, we were kind of rolling as we were receiving, and I think that made it really exciting. But also we had to really think on our feet how that was all going to work,
Well, I have to say, the songs that you have, and I really hope, Top of the World Tonight, I really hope that's being submitted for Best Original Song for Oscars this
I
year.
hope so too. Yeah, us too. I mean, we love all the songs, but that's a really special one.
Oh, that one is just, it is flawless on every count. But yeah, if there isn't at least one song from this film submitted for Academy consideration for Best Original Song, I'm going to be very upset.
Yeah,
I
me
can,
too.
I can tell you that. Working hand in hand with your production designer, with Mark Worthington, and drawing on, and he's masterful in television. He's
Yeah,
churned out great stuff over the years, going back to the days of Ugly Betty. He really grasps production design, which is
yeah,
why,
he's really brilliant.
well, and I think that he was a wise partner here as a department head for production design, because he has done these family things like Ugly Betty, where it gets more intimate with people and works within the natural confines of something. Even WandaVision.
Yes, exactly.
His work on WandaVision. It's working within the
Yeah,
confines of Rob Petrie's living room and and the Brady
right.
Bunch house. I'm curious about your work with Mark in coming up with the production design overall, but also with the color palette that you have
Yeah.
chosen, because normally I wouldn't think that browns and like dark burnished goldenrods would be used in the house, even though it plays back with the green of a crocodile in mud and water and things like that.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious about that and that collaboration and how you came up with that particular look.
Well, I mean, you said it. You picked out everything that we were hoping you would. I mean, the big thing and the big unlocking for us was, obviously we knew there was a brownstone, there was New York City. We wanted it to be fable-like and sort of, the book, so that if you're in Central Park, you definitely have a set of balloons with you, just because that was what the book really kind of created. And, we shot in Serendipity because that's sort of a storied old kind of, fern-based, sort of 60s restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And we tried to sort of get the book in there. There was one day that we really just unlocked the color palette. We were sort of having conversations about the look and feel, and the books were all in the middle of the conference room table. And we were standing with Mark, and we were, talking about, well, maybe it could be this way, and, well, it should be warm if Lyle's green, da, da, da. And we sort of looked down, and we're flipping through the book, and we were like, you know what? Just by the age that's happened over the years in terms of printing, the color palette has become so jewel-toned and sort of off that we basically asked Mark to make 15 swatches from the book. And that was like, the book's version of red, the book's version of blue.
Mm-hmm.
The book had all those versions of those colors, mainly red, a kind of mustardy yellow,
Mm-hmm.
obviously Lyle green, and a little bit of like kind of a Coleman cooler red. And then we sort of decided what we would assign for a few more things that weren't in there, like a rust and a blue, that would be there if they had assigned those colors to it. And once we kind of unlocked the color palette, we had these glorious, paint swatches of these big squares. Mark and his team, we were able to put them up on a wall and start to really just let wardrobe be informed by it, let the world around them be informed by it, and even so much as we got cars on the street that were all in that color palette. Thankfully, we got a yellow Volkswagen bus. We got a rust-colored Alfa Romeo coupe. All of these cars that we kept rotating around the streets, and then even the Primm station wagon, which is modern, which is the Audi. We painted the blue from our palette, and the luggage on the top was the same, and the moving van. So we tried to bring as much of it into the world as we could without overdoing it. But there were definitely moments where it would converge. Like there's a scene in Mr. Grumps' apartment, Brett Gelman's, where there's sort of up for sort of debate about the neighborhood and then how they're going to take the noise complaint forward. And three characters are on the couch, and they're all wearing these kind of like burnt, mustardy colored pants in Acorn, and we were like, okay, well, this is a moment where the palette is really tipping its balance, which happened once in a while. But luckily, Kim Barrett, who's our costume designer, and Mark were very close, worked really well together, and we also found this really great thing on somebody's Instagram, which was a pattern of wallpaper that we ended up using throughout the brownstone, which had all of our colors in it miraculously. So
wow.
I think, we tried to bring the book into the movie, and that's how, that was the crossover.
I would be remiss not to ask you about one of the most incredible finds and discoveries. Javier Bardem as a song and dance man.
Yeah, exactly.
He blew me away. Right from the top. Blew me away. And he looks very good in sequence. What led you to Javier Bardem as Hector? I mean, as the character of Hector, I see him no problem. But then you think song and dance? Blew my mind. He's incredible.
Yeah. He was amazing. I think for us it was that he sounded like the character, like who else would play, Hector P. Valenti, but Javier Bardem, like they both have the same sort of lyricism in their name. But it also felt like, he, even though he's played a villain so often, he's so funny, and he has such a kind of wit about him, and his characters are never boring. They always have this sort of duality of being kind of, at the same time, evil. They're very dynamic, charismatic, and funny. I think Bond, his villain in Bond is funny. I think in the No Country for Old Men's character has a lot of humor to it. So for us, it sort of felt like, kind of a logical fit. And, we were really adamant that he be the one. He was our very first choice, and we spent a lot of time convincing, begging, and cajoling him into doing it.
How much rehearsal time did you spend with him, and did he spend with the choreographer to get the song and dance number down?
Let's see. He probably, I think 5 months.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
He's
4 or 5 months up to it, yeah.
He's ready for Dancing with the Stars now. My God. So
He would love to hear you say that.
I seriously, I think he could knock any of the competition this year right off the mat. But I'm really curious because you've done Blades of Glory, which is hilarious, The Switch, Office Christmas Party. What is it for you as a filmmaker and as a storyteller that sets Lyle apart for you, that really challenged you and at the same time gives you so much joy at making this film?
What sets us apart? You be more specific. What do you mean exactly?
What sets it in making Lyle? Because it has a lot of things that you haven't had in some of your other films. So and the challenges of a 6'1" crocodile and these smaller places. It's not like you've got somebody on ice skates that you can watch fall down and yes, it's funny.
Yeah.
This is much more nuanced. It is an adaptation. You're dealing with proportion and production numbers.
Yeah. Well, I think we've been trying to grow. Do you know what I mean? I think we've been trying to expand into different areas, and I think we've always wanted to make a musical. I think we've always been interested in sort of what it means to pivot from comedy and bring it into other genres, and this really followed a lot of those, as well as sort of the passion as you have for the book.
An outstanding job, Will. Now, is there any chance we're going to see more Lyles? There were 10 books.
No, I know. Well, gosh, we hope so. I think part of it is the challenge of getting people to be in the theatrical space. So, yeah, I think we have to go from, making sure that he gets a lot of love on all platforms.
This is a big screen film.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
This is a big screen film. And I saw it over at Sony. And I got to tell you, It just draws you in and does not let go, and you feel, watching it on that big screen in Thalberg, I just felt like I was right there in the room.
Wow.
That's a testament to you and to Josh and your teams. It's one thing to be immersed, it's another to be so drawn in that you feel like you are right there experiencing it with Josh, with Mrs. Primm, with Hector, with Loretta the cat. This is it really. You experience this when you watch it. And that comes with the big screen.
Well, cool. I'm so glad you got to catch it on the big screen.
Absolutely. Well, this has been so wonderful getting to speak with you about Lyle, Crocodile. It is definitely one of my favorite films of the year. Hands down.
Yeah, well, that means so much to us, and thank you. And it was so nice to talk to you.
A pleasure to speak with you. I hope we get to do it again in the future.
Yeah, me too. Exactly. Okay, well, we'll talk soon.
Yes, Will, thank you again so much.